When a person finally decides to move with intention, life stops being a chaotic accident and becomes something closer to a well-constructed design. And that shift, subtle as it seems, is where everything begins. Most people wander through the world hoping luck will correct their laziness. But nothing meaningful has ever been built on hope alone. Reality bends for the individual who chooses to act with clarity, who refuses the soft, comfortable shortcuts that lead nowhere worth going. If you want to create your reality, start by accepting an uncomfortable fact: you are already creating it. Every habit, every indulgence, every reluctant decision is stacking up to define the life you walk into each morning. And if that life isn't what you want, the correction won't come from wishing. It will come from intention backed by relentless discipline. You don't need brilliance. You don't need inspiration. You need the willingness to do the right thing long after the excitement has worn off. That is how reality is shaped, quietly, steadily, by the person who refuses to drift and instead chooses to move with purpose. Life doesn't reward motion, it rewards intentional motion, and this distinction is far more profound than people realize. Most individuals confuse activity with progress. They assume that as long as they're busy, stressed, or constantly occupied, they're moving forward. But life is not impressed by noise or movement. It responds only to direction, clarity, and purpose. Intentional motion is the difference between a person who walks miles in circles and the one who takes 10 steps that actually matter. The world quietly separates those who wander from those who choose their path with precision, and it does so without apology or sentiment. Intentional motion is not about doing more. It's about ensuring that what you do carries weight, consequence, and design. When you move with intention, you're acknowledging that every action is a vote for the person you want to become. Even the smallest choices accumulate. The mind remembers them, the character reflects them, and the results mirror them. People often claim that they're unlucky or that life hasn't given them a fair chance. But more often the truth is simpler: they've been moving without direction, reacting instead of deciding, drifting instead of steering. Intentional motion requires honesty, the kind that exposes your own role in the life you're living. It forces you to ask whether your actions align with your goals or merely with your impulses. This is uncomfortable work, but it is the only work that produces a life you can respect. You can spend years working hard and still achieve nothing meaningful if the work lacks aim. Hard work without intention becomes wasted energy, like pouring water into a leaking bucket. Intentional motion plugs the leaks. It asks you to define what you want, why you want it, and what you're willing to endure to get it. Without that foundation, even the strongest effort collapses under confusion. People who fail aren't always lazy, many are simply unfocused. Their defeat comes not from lack of effort, but from lack of precision. They chase everything and catch nothing. And the tragedy is that they could have achieved something extraordinary if they had rooted their movement in purpose. Intention brings a kind of internal order. It narrows your focus, cuts away distractions, and keeps you from being seduced by immediate pleasures. When you move with intention, temptation loses its charm because you understand what it costs. You see the price of indulging in weaknesses. You see the long-term consequences of short-term thinking. The person who moves with intention does not rely on motivation or mood. Their direction is not fragile. It's built on a decision that doesn't need to be renegotiated every morning. This level of clarity gives you an advantage in a world full of people who keep changing their minds, adjusting their goals, and making promises they never honor. Intentional motion also creates confidence, not the shallow kind that depends on praise, but the deep kind built through consistent alignment between your actions and your values. You trust yourself because you know what you're doing and why you're doing it. This self-trust becomes a kind of internal armor. It protects you from the opinions of others, from the storms of uncertainty, and from the doubt that usually eats people alive when life gets hard. Intentional movement roots you. It gives you stability in a world that encourages instant gratification and impulsive decisions. The discipline required to move with intention is not glamorous. It involves saying no more often than yes. It involves choosing long-term growth over short-term comfort and showing up even when the effort feels invisible. But this is precisely why intentional motion is powerful. Very few people are willing to do it. And because so few are willing, the rewards are extraordinary for those who commit. Life becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. You stop making the same mistakes. You stop repeating cycles. You stop sabotaging yourself through distraction and procrastination. You start living with a sense of authorship, recognizing that your life is being written each day by the quality of your decisions. The truth is that anyone can move, but only a rare individual chooses to move with deliberate purpose. And that choice determines whether their life becomes a product of intention or a product of accidents, impulses, and missed opportunities. Your reality is built by the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching. And this truth is far more influential than the dramatic moments people like to celebrate. Large achievements are simply the visible tip of an iceberg shaped by countless small choices. Choices that seem insignificant in the moment but carry enormous weight over time. When you strip away illusions, it becomes clear that life is not shaped by announcements, declarations, or public efforts. It is shaped in the silence of ordinary days by the actions you repeat without applause, without pressure, and without an audience to validate you. These quiet decisions form the blueprint of your character long before your results ever show themselves. People often underestimate the power of these small decisions because they seem too trivial to matter. Choosing discipline over indulgence, truth over comfort, effort over excuses, these moments feel inconsequential because nothing dramatic happens right away. There's no immediate reward, no spotlight, no scorecard that reflects your discipline in real time. But life is always keeping track even when you don't realize it. You may think a moment of laziness or dishonesty passes unnoticed, but it doesn't, it becomes part of you. Likewise, each small act of discipline becomes part of you too. Over time, those choices crystallize into habits, and habits shape identity. The identity you build in private becomes the life you experience in public. A person who consistently chooses the easy path in private shouldn't be surprised when their life becomes hard. A person who consistently chooses the hard but correct path eventually reaches a point where life becomes easier, not because circumstances magically improve, but because their character becomes stronger than their obstacles. The world is built on cause and effect, and your private choices are the causes that eventually produce visible effects. Nothing is random. Nothing is isolated. Each choice is a brick, and the structure of your life is built brick by brick, often without you realizing you're constructing anything at all. The most successful individuals understand this. They know that the real battle is not fought in front of others, it's fought in the quiet hours, at the crossroads of choice where nothing seems urgent and no one is paying attention. In those moments, integrity is either strengthened or weakened. Discipline is either sharpened or dulled. You are either moving toward the person you want to become or drifting backward into patterns you claim to be trying to escape. It's easy to look disciplined when the world is watching. It's easy to talk about your goals, to make promises, to adopt the language of ambition. But your life is not shaped by your declarations. It is shaped by the unglamorous, often unnoticed decisions you make when you are completely alone. What people misunderstand is that your private decisions don't remain private for long. Eventually, the results reveal everything. You can hide your lapses from others, but you cannot hide them from your reality. Time exposes truth. It shows who has been consistent and who has been careless, who has lived with intention and who has lived with impulse. Your daily choices create momentum, and once that momentum takes hold, it becomes very difficult to stop. If your choices are aligned with your goals, momentum becomes a powerful ally, pushing you forward even on days when motivation is absent. If your choices are scattered or reckless, momentum becomes a liability, pulling you deeper into habits that sabotage you. There is also a psychological transformation that occurs when you start making intentional decisions in private. You begin to develop self-respect, the kind that cannot be faked or borrowed. You know what you've done and you know what you've refused to do. This self-respect becomes a root of confidence. It's not loud or boastful, it's steady and unshakable. It frees you from external validation because you no longer rely on others to confirm your worth. You know you've done the work even if the results haven't appeared yet, and that knowledge carries a kind of quiet power. On the other hand, when your private decisions contradict your public ambitions, you feel it. The mind recognizes the inconsistency and doubt begins to form. You can pretend to others, but you cannot pretend to yourself. Every small compromise becomes a weight you carry, adding friction to your progress. Those compromises don't just slow you down, they distort your sense of who you are, making you feel undeserving of the success you claim to want. The internal conflict grows until your goals feel unreachable, not because they are too large, but because your daily decisions are too small. The truth is that life is a mirror. It reflects the cumulative effect of your private choices. If you want to change your reality, you must start by changing what you do when the world isn't watching. That is where your future is quietly being built, one decision at a time. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you claim you want to be, and this is not a poetic phrase but a practical reality that separates people who talk from people who transform. Everyone has desires, ambitions, and dreams, but desire alone is cheap. Wanting something has never built anything meaningful. What determines your future is not the intensity of your wish, but the consistency of your discipline. Discipline is the daily execution of your intentions, the willingness to act according to your principles even when enthusiasm fades. It is the only reliable force that can carry you from your current identity to the stronger, sharper, more capable version of yourself that you imagine. Without discipline, even the most brilliant goal is nothing more than a fantasy that will dissolve under the pressure of everyday life. People often misunderstand discipline, assuming it is about restricting pleasure or living a joyless existence. But discipline is not punishment, it is alignment. It aligns your actions with your long-term vision instead of your short-term impulses. The undisciplined person is actually the one living with the most restrictions, restricted by distractions, by emotional swings, by habits that weaken their potential, by the constant chaos of reacting instead of directing. Discipline frees you by giving you control over the one thing that influences everything else, yourself. The reason discipline changes your life is not because it magically creates opportunities, but because it shapes you into the kind of person who recognizes, attracts, and sustains them. When you practice discipline, you're not merely performing tasks, you're rewriting the story you tell yourself about who you are. Each disciplined act sends a signal to your mind. You are someone who follows through, someone who chooses growth over comfort, someone who can be trusted to honor commitments. Over time, these signals reshape identity. And identity is powerful because people act in ways that are consistent with their self-image. A person who sees themselves as disciplined will behave in disciplined ways without constant effort. But a person who sees themselves as inconsistent or weak will find excuses irresistible. Discipline is how you shift that internal image from unreliable to unbreakable. Many people live stuck between who they are and who they want to be because they overestimate the importance of motivation and underestimate the importance of routine. Motivation is a feeling. Discipline is a decision. Feelings rise and fall, change with the weather, shift with your environment, and disappear the moment you face discomfort. But discipline remains. It doesn't require you to be inspired or excited. It only requires you to remember what you said you wanted and act accordingly. This consistency builds a compounding effect. At first, the results are small, almost invisible, but over weeks and months, the gap between the disciplined person and the undisciplined one becomes enormous. One builds strength, skill, clarity, and resilience. The other builds excuses. Discipline also sharpens your ability to endure discomfort. Most people quit because they confuse discomfort with failure. They believe effort should feel good. But the disciplined individual understands that growth rarely feels pleasant. Strength comes from tension, clarity comes from struggle, and progress often appears only after long periods of persistence. Discipline allows you to push through boredom, frustration, and fatigue. It teaches you to keep working even when the reward is not immediately visible. And in a world where most people are chasing quick results, the willingness to pursue slow mastery becomes an extraordinary advantage. Another reason discipline is the bridge to your future self is because it prevents your life from being dictated by impulse. Impulses are inconsistent, unpredictable, and often destructive. They lead to choices that solve a moment's craving at the expense of long-term satisfaction. Discipline allows you to override these impulses and choose actions aligned with your highest values. This principle, practiced consistently, reshapes every area of your life, your health, your finances, your relationships, your mindset. You stop acting like a victim of your emotions and start acting like the architect of your decisions. Even more importantly, discipline is contagious within your character. When you develop discipline in one area, it strengthens your ability in others. The person who wakes up early to train becomes the person who manages their time well, who communicates with clarity, who finishes tasks on schedule, who stops tolerating excuses from themselves or others. This internal tightening of standards creates a ripple effect that elevates every aspect of life. You become someone others respect, not because you demand it, but because you met it. Ultimately, the person you currently are has brought you as far as you can go under your present habits and mindset. To reach the next version of yourself, the one you imagine when you speak of your goals, you must cross a bridge, and that bridge is discipline. It is the one tool that turns intention into identity, potential into competence, and dreams into a lived reality. Most people drift through life without realizing they're drifting. They confuse movement with progress, noise with direction, and exhaustion with achievement. They wake up each day responding to whatever demands their attention rather than choosing what deserves it. They follow trends, impulses, moods, and the opinions of others, and all of it leads to a life that feels scattered, fragile, and inconsistent. The few who actually win at anything meaningful operate differently. They move with clarity, purpose, and responsibility. They understand that drifting is the default of human nature, and if you don't actively fight it, you are surrendering your future to randomness. Life doesn't gently steer you toward greatness, drags you toward complacency unless you take the wheel with intention. Clarity is the first dividing line between drifters and achievers. Clarity means knowing exactly what you want, why you want it, and what you're willing to do to get it. Drifters avoid clarity because clarity demands accountability. If you define your goals precisely, you can no longer hide behind excuses or pretend you're progressing when you're not. Purposeful individuals embrace clarity because it gives their actions weight. Every decision becomes easier when you know what direction you're committed to. Without clarity, the smallest distraction becomes attractive because it feels like progress even when it isn't. With clarity, even the biggest distraction looks like a waste of time. The world becomes sharper because you know where you're going. Purpose sharpens this clarity further. Purpose is the internal engine that keeps you aligned when life gets difficult, when motivation fades, or when setbacks pile up. People who drift lack purpose because they've never stopped to ask themselves what they truly believe in or what they're trying to build. They use business to mask the emptiness beneath their actions. Those who move with purpose, however, operate on a deeper level. They don't require external validation to stay committed. Their purpose fuels them, steadies them, and anchors them. It turns work into meaning and effort into identity. Purposeful movement is powerful because it removes hesitation. You don't waste energy questioning your path, you use all your energy to walk it. But clarity and purpose mean little without responsibility. Responsibility is the ultimate separator. Drifters avoid responsibility because it confronts them with the truth. Their actions, choices, and habits are entirely their own. They prefer to believe that circumstances, luck, timing, or other people determine their outcomes. Responsibility destroys that comforting illusion. It forces you to accept that you are the author of your life, not a spectator. And once you internalize that truth, drifting becomes impossible. Responsibility ties your choices to consequences in a way you cannot ignore. It forces discipline. It forces intention. It forces you to stop talking about what you want and start behaving like someone who deserves it. People who drift often look at those who move with clarity and purpose and think they're simply more talented, more lucky, or somehow built differently. But the difference isn't talent, it's direction. It's not luck, it's intention. Those who succeed have made a conscious decision to eliminate the randomness from their lives. They decide what matters. They decide what to ignore. They decide what standards to uphold. Drifters let the world decide for them. This is why their lives feel chaotic. They're not choosing a direction. They're being pulled by whatever noise is loudest. Clarity, purpose, and responsibility create a straight line in a world full of curves and detours. When you possess all three, you stop being reactive and become proactive. You stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. You stop carrying the weight of indecision. You become efficient, precise, and calm. People around you may even accuse you of being too focused or too intense, but that's only because they're used to drifting. Focus looks extreme to people who lack direction. Purpose looks obsessive to people who lack commitment. Responsibility looks burdensome to people who refuse to grow. The danger of drifting is not that you'll fail spectacularly, it's that you'll waste years in quiet stagnation. You'll live on autopilot, half awake, only to realize too late that you've spent your life reacting instead of creating. Nothing is more costly than drifting, because time spent drifting can never be reclaimed. But when you move with clarity, purpose, and responsibility, you make time meaningful. You turn each day into an investment instead of an expense. You shape your future deliberately. And in a world where most people let life happen to them, becoming someone who chooses their path is its own form of winning.